Welcome all.
Welcome all. It's Mark and Fred on Financial Friday show. How are we all doing out there in television land? Hope we all doing great.
It's a beautiful day. Just another beautiful day.
Yeah, I'm looking out the window there. So it is an absolutely beautiful day here in North Carolina. How does it look for you in Jersey?
It looks very autumn.
Okay.
Leaves are starting to change.
Autumn.
Yeah, and it's chill starting to get in the air early in the morning. But it's a beautiful day outside. Nice sunny day.
It's my favorite time of the year. I don't know if you knew that, Mark. It's absolutely my favorite time of the year. It's just the change of seasons. And it's just that you can wear various different layers of clothes that kind of break up the shorts. The shorts and the t-shirts, kind of, gives you a little bit of different look, kind of different flair. And speaking of flair, let's look at that beautiful shirt that my co-host is wearing. He made a joke earlier, and we was like, "What do you mean, pumpkin? It looks great with your complexion. It blends in so well with your background." I thought it was wonderful. I think he should always wear those colors. And if I have a poll right now, I would actually put out and say, how many people think he should always wear light colors? And I would say everyone.
My wife said as I'm leaving the house, "Buy my pumpkin pie. I love you."
Well, that's it. That's the love touch, right?
Absolutely.
We hear so much about Mark on these shows. So to go right into it today, guys, we're going to be talking about the topic of mortgages. What do you think about that, Mark?
It could be very, very, very confusing. Very confusing.
But it's timely. It's timely because right now, one of the markets that's doing very well for itself is real estate.
Very well.
I have a lot of partners that are in real estate, and that used to be my my other career, and I still maintain those relationships from when I used to work in banking. And everyone is just completely overwhelmed right now. I mean, mortgages galore, galore, galore. But the conversations that they're having are totally financial, all financial. There's nothing else that's being talked about. It's all about, look, down payment. Let's get you, let's pull credit. Let's get you pre-qualified. Let's get a 1003, which is a uniform residential loan application. And let's move you through the underwriting process. And let's order that appraisal as quickly as possible, because there's so many people purchasing homes right now that is, and I'll give you an example. In Charlotte, there's only a 30-day supply of houses on the market.
Wow.
And that's in the sister city. I live in Raleigh, and that's in a sister city. And 30 days of inventory, that should tell you something. That should tell, even in your neck of the woods, in Jersey.
Oh, yeah. New Jersey.
Yeah.
Very much so. In New Jersey, I have a lot of realtor clients, and they're listing the home for one day. There's just not enough inventory. It's not.
I noticed in the news that people are actually negotiating in the suburbs up north. Your house is listed for $750. You're selling it for 1.3.
Right. It's exactly right.
Amazing. It's an overinflation problem. I think I don't know how you would get the appraisal, to be honest with you, because if the house is being listed at a certain price, but you just have buyers that's willing to pay more in a competitive auction environment, that means you got to have some real to bring up the difference that the bank won't pay. Yes, money. You got to have money. So if the bank says that we're only going to lend against a value of $800,000 and the home is selling for $1.3 million, well, you do the math. It means that you may be upside down in the home. And the question about that, Mark, what actually play really well into what we're talking about today. Is there a better use for that money? Is there a home somewhere you should be parking your money?
Maybe. Just
Okay.
maybe.
Maybe. Depends, right? It depends. I guess it depends on how much cash or access to capital that you have. Okay.
And that's right. Cash is king. And if you can have that tank of cash, easy, accessible, liquid, that's king today.
I can't imagine someone who's accumulated that kind of wealth would ever want to place it somewhere where it may not get them the same return on investment how they got there. So if you're like, what is he talking about? I mean, whatever do you mean? If I have the money to pay for it, I don't have a bill. What do you think about that, Mark?
Well, on the surface, you don't have a bill. Okay? On the surface, you don't have a bill. But, just think about that. I mean, you don't have a bill. However, you got all your money locked up in that hole, a trap. Okay? And you say you don't have a bill. And reality is, and people think about it is, how much interest do you earn in equity?
Well, I guess it depends on your location, right? And how much you're appreciating, correct?
True. But equity, if you have all your money tied up into a property, earns you zero. If I'm over here and my house is paid off, and same duplicate home next door, I think we've seen this analogy before. This one, they're borrowed, they're put very little down on that property, and they still have the same home, live in the same street, still pay the same taxes on the property. Okay, that doesn't go away. That bill's still there. I mean, they have access. This couple here has access to capital. Okay, this one is all tied up in that property. So in today's world, you're seeing all these great deals out there. You always want to have access to the capital. Okay, so sometimes it's good, okay, to have a bill, okay, because then you're in control of the bill versus money tied up inside of that property, okay. The only way you're able to get that money out of the property is what? Refinance, qualify to refinance, and sell the property.
But you got to have somewhere to live, though.
What's that?
You got to have somewhere to live, though. So
you do, and rents,
right? You're supposed
rents are up.
Well, rents are up, and I had a gentleman call me last night that's living in a assisted living facility, and he said, "Fred, I want to look at buying a home because what I'm paying here, I could have a home for what I'm paying." And I said, wow. Are you sure that that's something that you want because of your age? He's like, no, I think for my well-being, there might be some other options how I can, do the things I'm trying to do. It's just, for my mind, logically, it's bothering me more to pay that to someone else than for me to have a home. And I've always owned a home. I just allowed my children to decide for me that this was best. So
and
now
that's one heck of a home.
Well, he's got a point because he has a belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a perfect segue into what we're about to talk about. We're not here to debate, negotiate, or deter your belief system.
Right.
The goal is to come alongside of you and help you see things maybe in a different manner that might be something you hadn't considered. So it's to ride alongside of you. Say that shotgun and be your financial GPS. So let's go into Mortgage Master, and that's what we call it. And in this example, or in this communication, the way we're going to communicate to you is by trying to engage you with your belief system as strong as it is right now. And then what we're going to try to do is give you answers to these questions as we move through the presentation. Okay. So the first question I'd like all the viewers to ask yourselves is a large down payment, will it actually pay you or allow you to save money over time? And in this example, we're going to assume, since we don't have a live audience, that a large down payment will save you more money over time than a small down payment. We're going to say that most people, and Mark, you correct me if I'm wrong, would say that's true. That's right. It saves me money. That's why I'm going to put as much money down because it's going to lower my payment. Right, Mark?
100% of the people that I talk to, that is their philosophy. When they're purchasing, putting as much down as possible.
Well, let's take a look at question number 2. A 15-year mortgage will save more money over time than a 30-year mortgage. Well, most people I know would say that's true as well. Making extra principal payments saves you money. Well, I'll say again, many people will pay extra money towards a mortgage and trim money off of the back end, which only saves years because interest accrues on the outstanding balance, right? They're thinking that by accelerating the mortgage, that by the time they arrive at retirement, that extra surplus of cash can go towards lifestyle. So most people believe that's true as well. Interest rate. Well, right now, all I hear is, even last night with the gentleman I just referred to, he's like, with interest rates being so low, that's a main reason why I think it's to go back to being a homeowner versus living in an assisted living facility. So using his belief system last night, we're going to say that's true. And you are more secure having your house paid off other than 100% financed. That's a real interesting one. And we're going to really get in the weeds on that one, since people are paying more for a home that doesn't even appraise by lending standards, but they want that home so much that they've got into a bidding war. So let's say a lot of people, if Mark, only if you disagree, and you didn't earlier, so I can't imagine you would now. If people are doing that, that's a strong belief system that the market is going to command a higher value in the future. But the question is, how long will it take to arrive at that value proposition? Okay, let's go into it. And let's say that all of those answers, all those questions, are true. So when discussing this, and you know about the lending process, we all know what 30-year mortgages are because that is the one that's pushed the strongest. And that is what majority of America has. That has a mortgage, they have a 30-year mortgage because one, it's a lower payment. And two, it's, if you're buying a home at a certain age, even though that you could buy another home along the way, you tend to just take the longest time period just because some people don't even ever see them paying their home off. And then other people see it as, well, this is my home. I'm going to stay here. This is the final stop on the train ride, and I'm going to pay it off before I arrive at retirement. And then you have those people that might have a higher cash flow, or they have a belief system that a 15-year mortgage can give them a shorter duration if they're nearing retirement sooner, or they're younger and they just don't want to have a mortgage anymore. they're going to pick the 15-year option, and the interest rate on a 15-year mortgage typically is lower than a 30. So it's a very large investment. It's the biggest one that you can make without having cash. But it will, no matter what, create an unnecessary wealth transfer. And a wealth transfer is giving up money that could serve a higher purpose today than it could tomorrow. So here's the story. And we're not going to, again, go against your belief system. We just want to come alongside of it by saying, if everything you think you know, you think is true, what if I were to give you another example that would allow you to see things a little bit different? Would you be open for that? Well, if you are, all I'm asking you in this hour is to get yourself a bigger box. I'm not disagreeing with you either way. I'm asking you to allow us to come alongside of you and to let you see it from a different perspective. With that being said, you have three types of money. We all have three types of money. We have accumulated money, we have lifestyle money, and we have transferred money. Now, accumulated money is what you already had during this conversation. To even qualify for the mortgage, the banks don't give out liar loans anymore. You can't state what is not true. You can't say I'm $100,000 in the bank and no one's going to verify it. Now everything is verifiable. And having been an underwriter myself, I am looking on your 1003 under the asset section, trying to gauge, do you have a sufficient amount of money to repay this loan? Because I'm accountable for that one thing. I mean, I have a list of duties that's necessary to fulfill the loan, but I am your gatekeeper between you and the bank because I manage one thing: risk management. I am not trying to make a decision about whether if you're a good person or bad person, whether if you've had, whether if you're rich or poor. I'm trying to gauge the probability of repayment. And I'm going to make sure that the best bank, is not taking on too much risk as a result of lending you money for 30 years, 15 years. And we look to accumulated money for that because that's money that you can't easily get access to without a penalty, or 1099 if you withdraw it early. Lifestyle money, on the other hand, is more about where you choose to live. It's all about choice. It's how you develop and carve out your spending plan. Now, some of us spend more money than we have, and we get ourselves in debt. And that discussion we'll have next week, debt. Okay. But when it comes to lifestyle money, people are pretty feisty about that. They do not want you to touch the money that they have chosen to allocate to maintain that specific lifestyle. So I can tell you right now that Mark and I will never give you a discussion about accumulated money or lifestyle money. But we do work in the area of this red piece of the pie called transferred money. And if you haven't really kind of had that discussion with your financial advisor or anyone that you have in your trusted circle, you might want to have that discussion, because transferred money is monies that you might be losing unknowingly and unnecessarily. And what if you can retain those dollars and still get your cake and eat it too? What do you think about that, Mark?
I love it. I want a piece of that cake.
A piece of that pie. Okay. So, guys, here it is. Wealth transfers are going to happen no matter what you decide, because it's the cost to be the boss. If you finance, which we all do, we finance everything throughout our lives. Okay, think about for a minute all the things that you finance. Do you finance your school, cars, houses, boats? We finance everything because we don't want to give up the money that might, be sitting in our account, or maybe we don't have any money in our account and we're living above our lifestyle. But if you do finance, you're transferring interest for the privilege of using someone else's money. So the alternative of that, the mirror image, so to speak, is to pay cash for it. But you're losing interest because the money is no longer in a position of earning interest. So understanding where the money is going away towards unnecessary spending, we have to wrap our heads around that. And with that being said, why have a mortgage in the first place? So there are reasons not to have a mortgage, but there's more reasons to consider one, just like it says here. And one of those reasons is that the fact you can't write a check for it. It's not sitting in your account. So you can wait until it does get in your account or win the lottery, and then you can do it. Right, Mark? Or you can look at the ability, even though right now it's not favorable for it, but the mortgage deductibility that you can gain by having home ownership. The third is what's most important, and I'm sure Mark would agree, is the spread, the difference between the cost to borrow and what you can earn. Now, Mark, why don't you kind of expand upon the spread?
Really simple to do, and if we think about that, we're financing a loan, and just to give an example for easy math, when you go to borrow, and whatever that number is, you're going to pay a certain amount of money of interest on that loan. However, the bank receives that money at a certain rate, and they are able to find people like Fred and I who need to borrow that money. So we're going to come and put a loan application in to receive that loan from that institution. And the spread's going to be the difference between what the bank gets the money for to what they offer that to you. Simplest way put.
All right. I think it's a very good explanation. And it takes us straight into the biggest, most untouched non-point that many people forget about, right? And that's that word that begins with an I, called inflation. But it is a major consideration, and people just don't see that or enter into that discussion when you're talking about a mortgage, because you have other things that might be running through your mind. So let's look on average with taxes and insurance. Let's say that your mortgage is $2,000, and that we're currently, I'll use me for example. I was born in 1970. I got my first job in 1989. Okay. And I counted in 89, even though I, had a transitional time period with education, I still worked during that duration of time. And if I fast forward to 2019, that's my inflation of what it felt like my money performed at in 89 versus how it feels like in 2020. It's about 2.5%. So I am going to utilize 3%, round up, and I'm going to calculate that out, and I'm going to see what a $2,000 home payment, mortgage payment, would cost me in today's dollars. Okay, what would it feel like? And by clicking on this button here and watching the numbers go up, in 10 years, we've already devalued that money a little over $500 of what it feels like based on standard of living and adjusted for inflation. What does that $2,000 buy me in 10 years? Well, $1,488, right? So let's look what it looks like in 20 years. In 20 years, that $2,000 feels like $1,100. That's a $900, a little under $900 erosion of your value. Well, if we go in the full 30 years, let's go all out. If we go all the way to 30 years, now we're down to $823.97. Now, here's the question. Would it have been better to have utilized those monies differently when they were at the highest and peak of its value than to put it into a mortgage where in the future the value of those dollars are going to be substantially valued less? Do you want to elaborate on that, Mark?
Absolutely. I mean, so 30 years goes by and the purchasing power, someone goes to buy that house, you might feel that, you know what, I've had that home is appreciated in value and I could sell that home for maybe 50% or double. But reality is what you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, you're taking something that has a $2,000 value. 30 years later, that purchasing power is a third. I mean, left with less than a third of the value of purchasing power.
So the question would be, is would you ever, having learned this today, pay more against the mortgage than you have to? Or would you just make your normal payment and avoid utilizing more valuable assets, valuable dollars, which are right now? Would you ever want to pay extra against any mortgage, whether that's a 30-year or 15-year mortgage? Would you ever want to accelerate it now that you know what its values could be in the future? The answer should be clear. No. So the bank is watching your equity. And believe you me, I worked in a bank, very large bank, and we are always watching your equity. Believe it or not, we would foreclose on a 15-year mortgage quicker than we would a 30-year mortgage. Do you know why, Mark?
Absolutely. Sure.
Why?
Time. They would love to have that longer loan on the books. Time.
I agree with you, but I think there's a higher point at 30,000 feet. At 30,000 feet, to have a 15-year mortgage, there's more principal having been paid back. So it has a lot less risk for the bank compared to someone that has a larger loan amount because they're only paying snippets of principal back because it's interest heavy. Yeah. So the goal is to foreclose on a 15-year mortgage because it is more valuable. And a person with a 30-year mortgage will probably have a lot more time to catch up because looking at assets that the bank does not want back sitting on the books for real estate, REOs as we call it, sitting on the books. They don't want that on the books because it takes away from their many areas, but in particular for this discussion, to lend that money back out.
Right.
So that is what we call opportunity cost, guys. When you spend $100 that you didn't have to spend, you not only lost the $100, but what that $100 could have done for you had you been able to save it and potentially invest it. So, do you earn interest on your down payment? No, you do not. It's a cost to be the boss. Is a down payment accessible? No, because there is a specific terminology we use in banking called loan to value. And that loan to value could be 20% down, 80% loan to value is what the bank is willing to lend you. Or you can look at different types of loans. I won't go in the weeds on that. I mean, there's such thing as putting down 3.5%. And that's an FHA loan. Or there's 100% loans with VA or USDA loans. That's really the 4 types of loans. And in any of those cases that require a down payment in order to, the cost to be the boss, can you gain access to that money ever again without selling the property? And the answer is no. So what would your down payment be worth today had you put it in a side fund that was earning maybe 5 to 6%, which is about average of what the market pays? What would it be worth? It'll be worth a lot. And that, again, is opportunity cost. All right. So what is opportunity cost of your down payment? Well, the largest down payment that one can pay against a home is to pay cash for it. So let's say that you are in my particular market and our homes average about $250,000 on average. Okay. And you had a side fund that was, maybe giving you a rate of return of maybe 6%. And the years since you bought the home, let's say it's been at least 10 years since you bought the home. Okay. And in those 10 years, you've had to probably put more money in the home greater than the down payment that you put down, because it's not buying a home that's the real damage. It's servicing the home because it lasts longer, especially if you pay cash for it. So what would that opportunity cost be? Well, the opportunity cost to date would be $204,000, but you've got to add the $250,000 to that number. So that's almost $500,000 that you could have put that money somewhere else that could have gotten you a higher yield versus putting that money 100% paying cash for it so that you can say I'm debt free into a home. Sounds pretty good, Mark?
It's amazing that, the visuality of this, people are never explain this. Okay. They have no idea the ramifications of putting as much as they can down on properties. It's the belief system, okay, that were taught to them by their parents. Okay. Our parents were put as much down into a property, pay the house off as quickly as possible. That's what the older belief systems were. And some of the people today, or many of the people today, still have that system planted in their head. Okay. They're not looking at something like this. And when this hits you right between the eyes, it's like, oh my God. Oh my God. There's so much other opportunity that you had, and you locked it all up inside of this.
Well, here's the story. The story is what we started with earlier, building upon this conversation here. Is what's going on in New Jersey. How is it any different? Well, some people are going to be cash borrowers. I'll pay cash for it. I want it that bad. How much opportunity cost is it costing them? Or if they negotiate a purchase contract that's much greater than what the bank is willing to lend, and the bank says, well, you can have it, but we're not going to risk our dollars for an overvalued asset. If you want that home so bad, you bring the difference. Wow. Kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it? So, is a home a good place to park your money? That's the question. And the question is, if we take a home that if you pay cash for it, that's the value, okay, 250,000. And let's say that in the example I want to make here, let's say that you didn't go out and pay cash for it, that you decided to finance it, but you're trying to look at equity in the home. Let's say that you were smart enough to maybe buy the home for 175 and years have passed by since you purchased a home and it has grown in value. Maybe something exceptional happened. Let's actually increase this number. I feel a little bit more comfortable to take it up to about 200,000. And in 10 years, it may have grown to $50,000 in value. And let's say in a 10-year period that you had to put, some expenses in the home. So let's say that you did some improvements of 25,000. You might have added a garage. You might have to update the HVAC system. And let's say we also have to pay property taxes, all right? Or the state's going to do what? Foreclose on you. And let's say the property taxes in my neck of the woods, because I'm not that sure about Jersey, but I know it's expensive, right? But property taxes here, let's say on that home runs about $3,000, okay? But we've been in the home for 10 years, right? So we got to take 3,000 and times it times 10. So let's say in 10 years, we paid $30,000 in property taxes. In my neck of the woods, I say again that $250,000 home typically is in an area where it has sidewalks. So if it has a sidewalk, you have homeowners association dues. And let's say your homeowners association dues yearly is $500, but times it times what? 10, and that comes up to $5,000. And we could keep going and going and going and adding all the costs to be the boss to this equation, but let's say $60,000 in 10 years of home improvements and expenses. And we bought the home 10 years ago. What is the equivalent return on that investment?
Negative.
Negative 0.39. Now I'm going to go here and scale this back because, a little bit, let's take away something. And let's just lower our cost to be the boss, our capital improvements. And as you see now, it's at least out of the negative, even though I took something away, that's a reality. It still does not even summit 1%. So you have to ask yourself, wait, I thought equity versus appreciation was more valuable than this. You're telling me that the best I can hope for is a 1% growth? Well, yes. So it might be a better way, and I'm going to give you this comparison to let you see it for yourself. I'm going to take that $200,000 that I set there on the other page. I don't think it was 200,000. Yeah, it was. I did change it to 200,000. And we have a loan rate. Well, naturally, a loan rate in today's market is definitely not going to be 6%. If I remember correctly, yesterday, you could get a 30-year mortgage based on a 720 credit score for about 3.75%. And let's say we go for your garden variety, 30-year mortgage. Your monthly P&I, principal and interest, not your pity. They say pity a man that has a mortgage, not your your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. It's going to be just your P&I is about 926. Okay, so if we're looking at these numbers correctly, the opportunity cost, or actually the truth in lending, is going to say about $333,000 is what you're going to pay on your truth in lending by the time 30 years is up. Right. However, the opportunity cost of that mortgage, of those mortgage payments, had you been able to put that principal and interest in a location, in a side fund, it could have probably earned more. You kind of gave that money away. So that is the opportunity cost. So let's look here what that giving the money away or putting it in a side fund would look like. The same dollar amount, 200,000. And let's say for this presentation that to keep all things even, that the investment was getting the same cost or getting your interest rate ROI of 3.375, and the loan rate was 3.75. Let's say the same number of years. What would the opportunity cost be in that scenario? Well, looky. They're even. But I believe earlier in the conversation, and Mark, correct me if I didn't say it, that there are places where you can put the money that might yield a higher rate of return, and that rate of return could maybe bring back maybe 5 to 6%. What do you think, Mark? You agree with that on average?
I would say look at 5.25. I think that's really safe to say.
Okay, let's say for even numbers, let's just say 6%. Well, which one gives you the greatest opportunity, the side fund or the mortgage? So we need to rethink this a little bit, don't we? We need to think about whether if buying a home, having a mortgage, and paying more than we should, or buying more than we can afford is a good idea when we can utilize those funds a lot more efficiently. But I'm not done. If we own a home and we have mortgage deductibility, then we have to change our net cost to borrow, which is what I'm about to do here. And I'm going to say that your tax rate based on, someone that could afford the home of $250,000 is about maybe in the 24% tax bracket. And when we take that into consideration, that is credited back, but it still does not even come near to having put that money in a side fund that was earning steady Eddie compounding interest of 5 to 6%. So we might want to take a closer look at what our options are in financing the home, which is what we're going to do next. Because many of you just said, well, I'll just go with a 15-year mortgage. Well, the number one reason is because you think the interest you're going to save. You also think the shorter the loan duration reduces the cost of the loan. And if you go with this logic, you might as well pay cash for it. But we know we don't want to pay cash for it because we've demonstrated in previous slides that's not a good idea either. So for those of you who have a real strong belief system, 15-year versus a 30-year, let's take this scenario that we have here. And let's take that same $200,000 loan amount with an interest rate of 3.75%. And let's say that you have a 15-year mortgage payment of $1,454. And in a 30-year mortgage payment, you decide to still have that $1,454 because you have it to give, but you decide to put the difference in a side fund. Well, let's take a look at what that looks like. Well, based on this example, since the 15-year mortgage is paid off in 15 years, this particular family believes that they would take that money after 15 years and then invest it in that time frame. And the investment would give them a $422,000 rate of return at the 6%. But I think I need to change the 6% to 3.75 so that things will be equal. I got a little bit ahead of myself, guys. I need to back it up a little bit. And a 15-year mortgage and a 30-year mortgage equals the same. They do equal the same based on this 3.75% interest rate. But if I can put it in a side fund that's earning a greater rate of return at 6%, you'll see that family number 2 here that went with a 30-year mortgage and invested the difference of 528 actually has more liquidity, do they not, Mark, than family number 1 who says that after 15 years we're going to invest. Correct?
Can do a lot with $108,000, Fred.
Yes, you can. You can do a lot with that, and that gives you a lot more access to capital, which might lend really well towards your future investing. Because what if another Amazon were to come on the scene and you were to get on the ground floor? If you have access to capital and you're not taking that capital from your cash flow, $100,000 buys a lot of shares. Would you not agree, Mark?
Buys a lot of options too.
Yes, it does. So let's take this same assumption with the 2 mortgages. And let's say we have a 30-year mortgage here. And I said earlier about 3 3/4, but on a 15-year mortgage, we know that is typically about 0.5% less. Okay. And that's really just be ridiculous. Let's take it down 0.75% less to 3%. And look at the differences in the payments. And we still have our side fund of 6%. We have a marginal tax bracket of 24 based on your income and based on what your tax basis is. And let's move forward. And let's say that your rate of return is required in order to pay off that 30-year mortgage. If you went with if you wanted a 15 years, what would that look like? Well, what it would look like is a rate of return of about 4% after tax. Now, I just told you that the side fund did about 6%, and all you really needed was 4% in a side fund to pay off a 30-year mortgage in 15 years. I'm right in my wheelhouse, aren't I, Mark?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm perfectly positioned in my wheelhouse. I need less of a compound or yield than what I'm currently getting in my side fund. So if all things being equal, and we still assume that the side fund is doing 6%, then the side fund should be adequate to pay off the 30-year mortgage. But how much and how soon? Well, we can pay it off in 14.1 months. So if you desired to pay off the home, what if we could position you in something that could pay a 6%, 5 to 6% yield, and allow you the ability to pay off the home? But you might want to think about that because you would be surrendering your liquidity, and that may not make a lot of sense either, would it? So the last reason to have a mortgage would be is for the tax savings. And if I ask you how much tax savings would you want, what would your reply be, Mark?
As much as possible.
As much as you can have. And based on this chart, which one gives you the greatest mortgage deductibility? A 30-year mortgage.
Absolutely.
So when we go back to our quiz, we now have to agree, based on this logic of not challenging your belief system, but simply just showing you numbers and how numbers don't lie. Each of these line items or questions are what? False. But some of you are saying, okay, that was just too logical. No. That you're controlling something. Well, then let me default to an emotional reasons. Okay? To not have a mortgage, but there are emotional reasons to consider one. Well, first one is you become physically disabled. What does that look like? Are you at full capacity of your earning power? Or are you in partial capacity? And then the next question is, for how long? The next question would come into play is the worst one. In today's market, unemployment is pretty high. Would you not agree, Mark?
Yes,
They
very
just added
high.
800,000 to the 28 million that are currently on unemployment. That's a good reason to have a mortgage. The last one is what we're currently living in right now, the uncertainty of the world. And we all know what that uncertainty is. And with that being said, we're on the West Coast right now. We have fires. I believe it's 11 fires on the West Coast right now. And we're in the midst of a pandemic. Do you believe that that uncertainty of the world is a real strong emotional reason to have a mortgage? Because here's the story, guys. If your house is burned down, how long would it take the insurance company to put and replace that improvement? It could be months. It could be years. You don't know. But you got to have somewhere to live. So you need to tap into your liquidity and have access to capital more than you do having an asset that 200 and what is it 212 degrees starts the fire. Is that or is that steam? I forget the Celsius that it has to be. Mark, do you know that off the top of your head?
I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah. And your house burns down and it's now ash, but your family has nowhere to stay. And there's a family on the news the other day that has their home burned down and they moved in with friends. And guess what happened when they moved in with friends and family? They all 7 members of the family now have contracted COVID-19. Now that's a sad story.
Oh, it's terrible.
That's a terrible story. And now they're in quarantine. Their home is gone. Which one is more valuable right now? Because you can't resolve the situation. Bad things do happen to good people. But you can surely have access to capital, and that's a down payment on happiness. Tell me if I'm wrong, Mark.
Totally 100% right on.
That's a pretty good down payment. So in the last 6 minutes of today's Financial Friday, let's talk about a good story that Mark always has a whole bunch of. He is just like a abyss of stories. Share one of those stories that you think might coincide with our conversation today.
So it's story time. We need to give the story time a title because we're full of them. Both you and I are. I mean, and there's
let's call it Mark's Corner.
Mark's Corner. Well, we can talk about this because there's many a sad stories that Fred and I run into on a daily basis, and a lot has to do with the whole concept of this week's show. So many people have their monies inside of their four walls, and they go ahead and they lose their job. Okay. We touched on it. Unemployment is at a high right now. Well, what's going to happen? How do you get your money out of your home? You have to qualify for that. Banks don't really care. They want their money. Okay. Banks are going to lend you money when you have money. Okay. That's when they're going to lend you money. They're certainly not going to lend you money when you have no way to pay them their money back. And I've got multiple stories like this all of the time. People that I have met, people that have been referred over, during the fact-finding questions where I'm asking them all the time, I need to know their beliefs, and I'll learn quickly within the first 15 minutes if we share the same beliefs. The one thing I see so common, especially with older people, is they have all their money tied up inside of their home. and how they getting it out. Now they're retired. Okay, the job's gone, whether they're unemployed any longer or they retired out. How are they going to get it out of their house? Okay, well, there are certain ways they can do it, but man, to qualify for a loan today to do it, it's much more difficult. Okay, now they're going to either have to go and sell the home, okay, which is a problem, or they go ahead and they go pass away, because that's going to happen. Not if, it's going to be when. Okay, and now the kids are stuck. They're stuck with an asset that usually they don't want the house that they grew up in. They're living somewhere else. And I've run into this same problem all the time. Kids have their own lives going on. They're not living the same life with the parents. Although I'm seeing some boomerang kids back in the homes, but usually the older kids are out. Parents are doing their own thing. The kids aren't really paying attention to parents' finances, and they've got all their money sucked up into that house. So the kids are stuck with this asset. Now they have to sell it. Once it goes through litigation, after the process of probate. So this is just a really common problem. It's not just one story. I see this common entity at least 10 times a month. It's kind of high to say that. A minimum of 10 times a month, okay? That people are putting all of their money inside of that house, okay? When they have plenty of other avenues and opportunities. And, I'm hoping that this show opened up people's eyes that are paying attention that your property is not always the greatest place to keep your money.
Well, the add to what you're saying there is becoming physically disabled, whether that's by illness or injury. Banks are not in the business of income qualifying a person. And having been an underwriter, what's the first thing you think I look at? Debt ratio. If you don't income qualify and your income is less, no matter what you have in the property, I'm going to reduce your loan to value. Remember early in the conversation, guys, I'm going to reduce your loan to value to something more in the line of what you can afford to repay. It doesn't matter how much equity you have. So the only other alternative you have is to go into a reverse mortgage. And a reverse mortgage is what many people frown upon, but there's probably reasons why you are, and it's probably because no one has ever explained to you the purpose for a reverse mortgage. And I think that we are going to sooner than later do a reverse mortgage class. Maybe I even said last week we were going to do it this week, but I talked to a few people and they said, well, first, Fred, can you talk about a mortgage before we talk about a reverse mortgage? Okay. Because many people see reverse mortgages as exotic, but they're not. They're really not exotic. We talked about purchases today. We, kind of touched on refinances a little bit. I mean, if you look at the context of the conversation, but reverse mortgages, imagine the bank giving you income, paying you for what you did. Well, that sounds like an annuity to me. And hopefully that's enough to plant a seed in your mind that don't just assume that a reverse mortgage is not a good fit because, hey, look, bad things happen to good people. You may be already physically disabled looking at the show saying, well, they really don't have an answer for me. Yes, we do. It may, in fact, be a reverse mortgage. And if you can use or find or have a side fund that can give you still that comfort of liquidity, not knowing what the future holds. How much is that worth to you?
A lot.
It's worth you guys reaching out to either Mark or myself or both of us. And you can email us or call us. I mean, Mark, what's your number real quick before we end?
609-517-7827. And what's yours, Fred?
Mine is 888. We have an 800 number. It's 888-704-9114. Okay. And you guys are welcome to give us a call to discuss your particulars of, what your situation is, where you might be at right now in this process. There are answers at all steps or phases of whether you're buying a home, refinancing a home, or getting a reverse mortgage. So, Marc, last words?
I think it's really nice that you gave them a toll-free number that they could turn to. You're going to be berated with many phone calls. People love talking toll-free.
You gave them your direct number, you silly man. I think you're going to be just like this. This is what you're going to look like next time I see you. but
it's going to be like this. It's going to be my new wig.
But at the end of the day, do reach out to us. We hope you'll like and comment on our video. And it's Marc Katona and Fred Hicks. We're going to sign off for this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, guys.